Greetings all, Ferrari-Man 601 here. Welcome back to another 1/400 scale diecast model aircraft review of this from Gemini Jets, the Antonov 124-100M Ruslan. This airplane, like its arguably more famous but one-off bigger brother, the AN-225, is very, very big. And it's very, very big because it is the most popular outsized cargo transport aircraft in the world today. This airplane is a superlative generator. Just like its bigger brother, it is one of the largest aircraft flying in the world today. It's one of the largest aircraft flying when we talk about gross takeoff weight. Maximum takeoff weight is almost 900,000 pounds on this airplane. We've got 4 big engines. We've got 2 really high wings. We've got a big empennage. We have got 10 axles for the main landing gear. And we've got a cargo bay that can fit basically anything in the world. So it's big. We've got a nose that swings open. We've got a rear cargo ramp. We have got nose landing gear that can kneel down to make things easier to go on and come off. Yeah, and it all comes to us from Russia with love. Yes, back in the Soviet era, Russia needed to transport big things over large distances. So what did they do? They built 2 of the largest airplanes ever built. This, the AN-124, as well as its big brother, the AN-225. We took a look at the AN-225 several months ago, and that was a model by Herpa. This one is coming to us in 2021 by Gemini Jets. So we'll talk a lot about that other model that we also took a look at by another manufacturer. So we'll compare Herpa and Gemini Jets in terms of their tooling and their detailing in bringing us these 2 very similar macrocosmically aircraft, and they are actually derivatives of one another. Plenty of great detail on this one, though, so I do trust that you will very much enjoy taking a look at this airplane. Let's go.
Before we delve into this glorious 2021 release from Gemini Jets, let's take a look at the box in which it comes. Coming in at very close range from screen right, here we are. This is the AN-124 box. Upper left corner, Gemini Jets, of course, made for collectors by collectors, trademark, and then a rendering of the aircraft front and center on the front cover. And dimensionally, it is pretty close to the actual size of the model in profile there, and you can see it's actually quite a nice drawing there. Pretty cool, with all of the details visible on the drawing that are visible on the actual model. So pretty nicely done. There we go. Antonov 124-100M really is what this aircraft is. This is the 100M. Antonov Airlines logo in the bottom right, and of course you do have the look inside tab right there. Bottom panel, par for the course, Gemini Jets, and then 1/400 scale die cast model, highly collectible, superior quality, realistic metal landing gear, detailed printed graphics, as real as it gets, trademark features. Cool. Right side panel, there we go, Gemini Jets, 1/400 scale die cast model. Item number for those of you keeping score is GJADB1989, and then a smaller rendering, basically a smaller iteration of the cover art there on the top panel, reiterated here, Antonov 124-100. Top panel, Gemini Jets logo, adult collectible model, warning contains small parts and all of that stuff, and then your barcode and item number reiterated. There we go. And the left side panel there, basically the same as the right side panel, nothing new to report there. Back of the box, we have got a rendering of the aircraft in a rather steep climb there. Very nice. Gemini Jets logo, as real as it gets, and then you get all of the selling points there, once again reiterated with that slightly more of a write-up there. And then bottom, there we go, copyright 2021, Gemini Jets, Las Vegas, Nevada, USA. So there is the confirmation of the 2021 release date. And then, of course, all of your corporate website and social media links for Gemini Jets. And then, of course, the country of origin, China. Now, under the Look Inside tab, what do we got? We got the Void. And then we do have our customary write-up here that Gemini Jets usually do, I would say almost always do for their models, and I do greatly appreciate it because it does give us some interesting information about them. This particular write-up reads, Antonov 124-100. The AN-124 Ruslan is the world's largest production aircraft ever produced. First flown on December 26, 1982, the AN-124's initial mission was to answer the Soviet Union's need for a heavy strategic freighter similar to the U.S. Air Force's C-5A Galaxy transport. Like the C-5A, the AN-124's design includes a fully opening nose section and an aft opening ramp to allow for full pass-through loading of outsized cargo. Onboard winches and traveling cranes allow the AN-124 to lift internal loads in excess of 44,000 pounds. Another similar feature to the C-5A is the massive undercarriage that permits the Ruslan to operate on rough, unprepared landing and takeoff areas. With the splitting up of the former Soviet Union, many of these versatile aircraft have been sold off to the private sector. Interestingly enough, the AN-124 has become one of the world's most popular outsized cargo transporters. The Ruslan frequents airports all over the world, transporting outsized cargo loads that cannot be accommodated on standard freighter aircraft. The AN-124 has also become a popular aircraft for humanitarian and relief flights when parts of the world come under disturbance. Future plans for the AN-124 include an upgraded cockpit and new engines, so that this king of the skies flies on for many more years. One stylistic error I will point out, that last sentence there. And new engines, so that this king of the skies flies. No. Subjunctive mode, folks. So that this king of the skies may fly. There we go. That works better. Regardless of me being a grammarian, we've also got some specifications visible here. AN-124-100, the livery in this one is Antonov Airlines. The aircraft type is the Antonov AN-124-100. Serial number for this particular one was 19530502288. Line number was 02-08. Registration is Uniform Romeo 82027. The engines are 4 Progress D18Ts. The delivery date for this airframe was May 1993. Maximum takeoff weight is 886,258 pounds. Cruising speed is 537 miles per hour. The range is 8,700 statute miles. And the overall capacity there for cargo and other internal loading, 330,693 pounds. And over here we do have our schematic views from profile as well as from above. Overall length is 226 feet 8 inches. Height from the bottom of the main gear to the top of that vertical stabilizer is 69 feet 2 inches. And the overall wingspan is 240 feet 6 inches. So you do get the sense quite quickly that we are talking about a very, very big airplane. Although it is not the absolute biggest airplane that has ever successfully flown, it is, as the box said, the largest production airplane that has ever been built in large enough numbers to be considered in production. And we do have several of these aircraft, I believe 26, still in service today in July 2021. With the aircraft rotating once again, some more detailed information and specifications about this AN-124. What is this airplane? Well, it is a heavy transport aircraft that originates from, at the time, the Soviet Union. It was designed by the Antonov Design Bureau based in Ukraine at the time, and Antonov Airlines, whose livery we see this aircraft regaled in, remains based in Ukraine to this day, and you might be able to discern that by looking at the livery of this airplane, very prominently featuring the blue and the gold, which happen to be the national colors of the state of Ukraine. The aircraft first flew on December 24th, 1982, which is a discrepancy there with the Gemini Jets box, who credit the first flight as happening on December 26th, 1982. However, the aircraft made a formal service introduction in 1986, and it remains in service to this day. The primary operators of this aircraft were, and still are, the Russian Air Force, first the Soviet Air Force, and now the Air Forces of the Russian Federation, Antonov Airlines, whose livery we see it in, and Volga-Dnepr Airlines as well. The aircraft was produced between 1982 and 2004. A grand total of 55 were built and delivered to their respective operators. There are plans, still tentatively at this point, to resume production of the AN-124. There were abortive plans prior to 2014 and Russian action in Crimea to restart production in Ukraine. However, there are firms still exploring the possibility of resuming production of AN-124 airframes, so we may yet see more of these in the world, and I think that would be a rather welcome sight for all of us aviation enthusiasts. Overall specifications on this aircraft, though, the AN-124-100M specifically, what do we have here? Well, first of all, we have got a high-wing, 4-engine cargo jet, and yeah, it's pretty big. It's the largest production airplane, as in having more than one of them ever built, that has ever been in active service, and well, the dimensions there, even in 1/400 scale, they do look pretty substantial. It takes 6 people to fly one of these airplanes. You've got a pilot, a co-pilot, and a navigator, but also you have a chief flight engineer who's going to be in charge of all of the critical flight systems, such as your engines, the fuel systems, hydraulics, pneumatics, and things like that. And additionally to that, you're going to have an electrical flight engineer, because you've got basically 2 primary electrical systems in this aircraft. You've got the avionics, and you've got all of the systems required to keep the airplane flying, but you've also got important systems for that cargo bay. You've got cranes in there, you've got winches in there, and you've got climate controls in there, not only for your pressurization, but also for temperature control, because this airplane can carry anything that can fit inside. So we may well have temperature sensitive and pressure sensitive materials in there, so you need somebody who is explicitly charged with overseeing the environmental conditions in that cargo bay. So you've got an electrical engineer on board as well. You've also got a radio operator who is going to be sort of a doubling of the electrical engineer and the navigator roles. And you're also going to have up to 2 load masters, depending on what sort of cargo you have. Overall capacities, though, what do we have? The box said that it can hold 330,693 pounds, or 150,000 kilograms, and that's true here. It can also carry up to 88 passengers in a passenger compartment that is aft in the upper fuselage, above the cargo deck. So basically, right in this area where we actually have 2 doors. We have an emergency exit, and we've got a loading door as well. So we've got basically a combi sort of airplane, really, as in that it does have a cargo cabin and a passenger cabin. So very interesting. However, we could also seat up to 350 passengers in the cargo bay itself, should they want to put temporary seating arrangements in there, and I believe that has been done a handful of times with these airplanes. So it's very versatile from the outset. The specifications, as we mentioned on the box, though, we've got an overall length of 226 feet 8 inches, or 69.1 meters. The wingspan is 240 feet 6 inches, that's 73.3 meters. The overall height, 69 feet 2 inches, that's 21.08 meters. Overall wing area, though, that's 6,760 square feet, or 628 square meters. The wings have an aspect ratio of 8.6. Empty weight on the airplane, that is 399,037 pounds, or 181,000 kilograms. The gross weight, the maximum fuel weight on board, is 471,789 pounds. That's 214,000 kilograms. That's at maximum takeoff fuel. Maximum takeoff weight, though, with maximum takeoff fuel and maximum cargo, 886,258 pounds. That's 402,000 kilograms. My oh my, that is enormous. Maximum landing weight, therefore, is 727,525 pounds, or 330,000 kilograms. Overall fuel capacity is 92,130 US gallons, or 348,740 liters. Lots of gas for this plane as well. The power plant here, we have 4 Progress D18T turbofan engines. They produce 51,000 pound-feet of thrust at sea level each. That's 229 kilonewtons in the rest of the world's dollars. So you could multiply that 51,000 pound-feet by 4 for total thrust at takeoff at sea level. Cruise speed is 537 miles per hour. That is 865 kilometers per hour, or 467 knots. We can have different ranges depending on the sorts of atmospheric pressure we've got, cruising altitude, and of course the speeds that we're flying as well. Overall cruise speed will fluctuate therefore a little bit. It ranges between 800 and 850 kilometers per hour between flight level 328 and 394. That is 32,800 and 39,400 feet respectively. Approach speed when we're coming in to land this airplane, assuming that we are at maximum landing weight, we're only going to be doing about 160 miles an hour. That's 120 to 140 knots, or 230 to 260 miles per hour. So Interesting that we've got such a low approach speed on this airplane, and we can see why that is. That very long, high, relatively straight wing, lots of low speed lift, and of course we've got a full complement of flaps and slats and spoilers as well on this airplane. Overall range with maximum payload is 2,300 miles, that's 3,700 kilometers or 2,000 nautical miles. However, when we start to bring our payload down, our range starts to go up. We will do 8,400 kilometers or 4,500 nautical miles. That's 5,200 statute miles with an 80,000 kilogram payload. That's 176,370 pounds. We can get all the way up to 11,500 kilometers. That's 7,100 statute miles or 6,200 nautical miles with 40,000 kilograms or 88,185 pounds of payload on board. Surface ceiling on the airplane, its maximum certified altitude is 39,000 feet or 12,000 meters. I do suspect it actually can fly a bit higher than that, but that's as high as it'll go during normal operation. Overall wing loading, we've got 131.1 pounds per square foot or 640 kilograms per square meter. Thrust to weight ratio is 0.23 to 1. The maximum takeoff distance for maximum takeoff weight is 9,800 feet of runway, that's 3,000 meters, and the maximum landing weight distance comes out to be 3,000 feet or 900 meters. So we've got a long takeoff required, but the landing can be done in 3,000 feet of runway theoretically. Why is that? Well, you got the high wing, which means you can approach slowly, which is why I wanted to talk about the approach speed. But also, that's what this thing was designed to do. This is a military airplane, really, when you go back to its original design. So, yeah, you might not always have a nice, long, smooth, wide, paved airfield to come into. So you might need to get things stopped reasonably quickly. So 3,000 feet of runway is all it takes to stop this thing. Very, very interesting stuff, all things considered there. I do very much have to admire Soviet era and later Russian era design because they tend to overbuild things so much. Whatever they think an airplane needs to do, they're going to make sure it can do at least twice that because the Soviet Union was enormous and Russia today still is enormous. And relatively few areas in that gigantic country have the absolute best infrastructure, but they all have absolutely critical needs. So you've got to get your stuff around, and that's what this airplane can do, and it needs to be able to do it on a perfectly smooth paved runway, and it also needs to be doing it off of grass and gravel and all kinds of things. We mentioned this in our review of the Ilyushin 6.2, but same sort of deal. An aircraft designed by the same people for a similar purpose, but to do a specific job in a very different capacity, and they always deliver, Russian designers, and they definitely delivered here with the AN-124. What of the details and other features on this Gemini Jets 1/400 scale rendition of the AN-124? Well, this is a 2021 release, which makes it one of the newer ones in the Gemini Jets lineup, and I've got to say I was surprised to see that they were going to be releasing this one. Gemini Jets, their bread and butter, it's airliners, regional airliners, long-haul airliners. They've done a lot of Airbus and Boeing airplanes lately, and we love all of those, and I've got a great number of those, and they're great. But it's not too often that they give us a really uncommon airplane like this, and they certainly did twice. They released one of these a few months before this release in the Volga Dnepr colors, and I thought about getting that one, but ultimately I said no because I don't really like the livery, to be honest, and that was about it, even though this is a fantastic airplane. So I held off on it, and I was very surprised to see that they were going to release another AN-124 in the Antonov Airlines colors, and this goes very nicely with the Antonov 225, although that's a Herpa release that I reviewed quite a few months ago by this point, but obviously they're stablemates and they're in the same livery, so I couldn't pass this one up, so therefore here it is. What do we have, though? We have got some fantastic detail. I do recommend that you take a look at the review I did of the AN-225 by Herpa, because I was very not surprised necessarily, but I was taken aback by just how comparable this one is to that one. Even though it is a different airplane, they're two very similar nonetheless, but Herpa is a different company from Gemini Jets, and I had my expectations a little bit tempered, but They really did a job on this plane, and there are some details on this one that are absent on the Herpa model, if you could believe that. And looking here at the nose of the airplane, I think you can start to see already what I mean. You can see all of those shut lines that are between the openable nose section here in the forward section below the cockpit windows there. On the Herpa model of the 225, they're there, but they're tampo printed in. They're not actually indentations in the fuselage. These are actual shut lines, then you can see how the light's falling into there. They are in 3 dimensions. It's very, very cool. Nothing is openable here. It's not an interactive series by any means, but what they have done with modeling all of those shut lines is very admirable, and I greatly appreciate it. And from a distance, you start to see that. You see that that's a 3-dimensional surface, and I really, really think it adds a little bit of visual pizzazz to the model. And I don't know if it's really very apparent there on your picture, because the camera tends to flatten things out quite a lot, but definitely by eye, it is visible. What else do we have? Well, you can see that we have got great tampo printed graphics all across on every surface of this airplane. We've got the name of the aircraft there on the port side facing us of the nose. There's a complementary side on the starboard side, that same detail. We've got Antonov 124-100M clearly visible there and perfectly legible, no problem. Moving aft, you can see International Cargo Transporter, and then it's got all the contact information for Antonov Airlines with their email, telephone, and fax lines, so that's all there, and it is legible. You might just be able to make it out on the picture here, but it is all readable. You've got the flag of Ukraine below that as well as the logo of Antonov Airlines. Very cool. Below that, and slightly to the left, you have got an entry door, and then directly below all of those graphics, you've got another entry door, I believe. So, interesting. I believe the door to our left is more so for the flight crew to be getting up toward the cockpit, and then the other door slightly below and to the right, aft on the airplane, is more so for the cargo crew to get in there to do whatever they need to do, or for passengers to be able to get onto the airplane as well, should it be carrying some passengers. So very interesting stuff there. Additionally, we do have a couple of antennas on this airplane. You can see that we have got our forwardmost one here, just vertical, just above and rear slightly of the fuselage, of the cockpit rather. That's cool. And then, of course, as we move aft, you can see that we've got another antenna here facing forward and bent a bit. It came that way, and I presume it's supposed to be bent, but regardless, it looks good anyway. If you do have this model, let me know if your second antenna there in the wing spar there is bent or not, but I think it's supposed to be. That's cool. Another detail that I really like here is just the geometry of everything. As we get in toward the wing root, you can see that we have got this big blister in the upper side of the fuselage. That's not a mistake at all. That's on the real airplane, and it looks really good, and I greatly appreciate that they took the time to model that contour so nicely. It, again, just adds a little bit of visual appeal to everything, and it looks really, really nice. Below that, we've got our nose landing gear, and here's where I'll remark that the landing gear on this airplane are entirely static. They do not roll at all. The tires are not even rubber. They are plastic. So just like they are on the Herpa AN225, this, the Gemini Jets AN124, also has completely fixed static landing gear. So if that's going to be something that is a detractor for you, well, just be aware that that's what you're getting into should you decide to purchase this model. Moving aft a little bit more, we get into our wing root and wing structure area proper. You can see that we have got these two engines here underneath the wing. They are modeled very nicely. Everything on the nacelles looks right. The nacelles there are done in plastic, as are the pylons that they're mounted to, but the rest of the airplane is all die-cast with the exception of the landing gear and, of course, the other engines on board. But yeah, very, very nicely done. I like the geometry of the leading edge of the wing as we see it here. Very convincing, and we've got that big strip there housing our de-icing equipment as well as for our slats that will come down out of the leading edge. Very cool. Something that I will point out, though, that I don't think it's a detractor per se, but it's definitely noticeable. These shut lines fore and aft here around the wing, you can very clearly see where the wing assembly has been just mated in one big piece to the top of the fuselage for the model assembly, and you notice that. I don't know if it's necessarily something that is bad, but it's there and you will see it. So if that's going to be something that bugs you, just be aware that it's there. Moving outboard on our port side wing, though, there's the wing tip with our marker light there, and we have got red painted wing tips on this one, just as we had on the 225, so very cool. You can also just get a glimpse, a little bit out of depth of field, though, of the main landing gear, a lot of them there, and that is, of course, to distribute this airplane's immense, almost 900,000 pound gross weight at maximum takeoff weight across the runway surface, so they don't punch holes in the runway. That would be really, really bad. Moving aft, we can get into an emergency rescue hatch here for the passenger compartment, as well as a loading door there for the passenger compartment. So interesting. I presume that air stairs or even a jetway, in theory, could get up to that loading door. Also, we have got our registration here on the aft portion of the fuselage, Uniform Romeo 82027, very nice. And continuing to move aft, we start to get into our empennage with our vertical and horizontal stabilizers well visible there. Vertical stabilizer with the silver strip there for our de-icing, that's cool. You can also see that we have got shut lines for the rudder control surface there. Big Antonov logo, very, very cool. And then we've got our horizontal stabilizer coming across here, the port side one visible here, with our de-icing boot and our red wingtip there as well. So all in all, some great things to see detail-wise on this airplane from profile port side at very least, and the story just continues as we continue our circuit around it. Moving in, nose on the AN124, what do we have? Well, we have got some more really great detail here evident. First of all, you can see that we have got that geometry that we talked about looking at the port side, these two blisters that come in. You can see that they are symmetrical on both sides, and they really just flank the expansion of the fuselage getting in toward the wing root, and it looks very, very nice. But also here, you can appreciate the true shape of the fuselage. It's this big ovoid or oblate ovoid pattern. I'm not entirely sure what you would call this particular geometry, but it looks a little bit like a misshapen egg, and obviously that's to maximize space in the payload bay, which is directly behind the nose cone there, and it goes all the way back to the rear of the airplane. So that's cool, and again, it's very distinctive. It's also quite reminiscent of the C5 Galaxy, which the box even concedes was one of the inspirations for the AN124. Additionally to that, you can see that we have got great little fairing detail here on the nose tip. They're not fairings per se. I think they're little vortex generators just to start to energize airflow around the nose, because I think they're a little bit concerned about vibration and drag induced by the shut lines around where that nose hatch comes in and fits to the rest of the fuselage. So they're probably just trying to speed up air so it doesn't start to get hung up around those shut lines, which probably don't made up 100% flush. So any little bit more efficiency they can gain by that, they're going to do it. Below that, you can also see our nose landing gear. Yep, you got two of them. They are just placed off the center line, and they distribute the weight of that big nose. They also have the capacity, just like on the AN225 as well as on the C5. The nose can kneel down a bit to make it a little bit easier for, once this nose opens up, you have retractable ramps that will extend out of the cargo bay so that cargo that can be driven off of the airplane can be driven off of the airplane, and other wheeled cargo can then be towed out or winched out by the airplane's own onboard crane and winch system. So all that's very cool. I will highlight a slight fault here, though. You will see that on screen right, the landing gear is not quite touching the ground, whereas it is on screen left. That is a flaw. That's a fault. It's a flaw, whatever you want to call it. But is it big? No. We're really magnifying this image here on the camera, so it's not quite as apparent with the naked eye, but it is there, and you'll notice it if you're looking for it. But other than that, it doesn't affect anything. The airplane is still sitting straight and level. Very nice. Moving outboard here on our starboard wing, what do we find? We find that we have got our two engines here on the starboard side modeled very nicely, and we can see we've got fan blade detail in there. That looks absolutely awesome. Those two D18 engines there, very, very cool, and I appreciate the detail that's in there. The fans there are completely static, so they don't spin or anything like that, but clearly they took the time to model that. You can see the central spinner in there, and it all looks very nice. And also we get a nice opportunity to take a look at the overall wing geometry and how severely it droops down from the wing root all the way down to the ground. And what they're doing with this is, first of all, this wing is very heavy, so having a natural droop in the structure is going to be beneficial in terms of wing loading. It's also going to allow for more uplift under high loading conditions in flight, but having the wing droop down very low like that, get your wing tip down toward the ground, you're going to maximize the ground effect lift that you get on takeoff and landing, and that goes more of a way toward increasing the amount of runway that you don't use on landing. So that high landing weight situation where you can get it stopped at only 3,000 feet, that's one of the reasons why they're able to do that. It's very cool. Obviously, the thrust reverse on the engines, the ground spoilers that come up, the flaps, and all of that definitely come into the equation as well, but your wing geometry by itself can have something to do with your landing distance. So very, very cool. On the port wing, we can see the intake sides of the engines here on the port side, and they look very similar, of course, as you'd expect, to the engines on the starboard side. They look very nice here as well. And here, because the light's a little bit more of an oblique angle, you can see highlighted on the nacelle intakes the de-icing ring that is around the outside of the engine as well. Very nice. Also, moving back toward the center line of the fuselage, you can see the cockpit windows very nicely modeled, as well as little windscreen wipers that are up there between the two main cockpit windows as well. Very, very cool. Moving up toward the empennage there, looking aft, there we go, coming into focus. Very nice. Everything sits pretty straight on this. The airplane is not facing exactly nose on to the camera, so that's why there's a little bit of a parallax effect happening. But I assure you, the horizontal stabilizers are not off in their pitch relative to each other. They both are absolutely straight to my eye, and the vertical stabilizer is also sitting, well, pretty much true vertical. So I have got absolutely no complaints about any of that, and really no complaints about anything on this model, with the exception of that wonky nose landing gear, just a little bit too high on the port side. But other than that, looks absolutely marvelous. Now taking a look from the starboard side of AN124, coming back in here close up to the nose section, and you can see that we have largely the same details evident here as we had on the port side, as you would well expect. International cargo transporter with an upper level door there for, again, accessing the cockpit from the starboard side, rather than the boarding doors that we saw on the port side. So we don't have the lower doors here on the starboard side, but we do have this upper door that we didn't have on the port. Very cool detail there as well. Again, with our shut lines, they still look absolutely marvelous. That's absolutely great. And our cockpit windows as well with good tampo printing. We saw this on the port side as well, but I didn't point it out. You've got two air data ports there, pitot tubes and angle of attack sensors. They look absolutely marvelous. Also here, you can see that we have got this arrow. This says rescue. You can't read it because it's too small here, but it says rescue, and it's cool. It's in Ukrainian as well as in English. Very cool. Wing root area again with our big shut lines for the wing, but it's all good. On the sides of the nacelles, you can see some hard points here for ground crews to interface with the engines if they need to, bleed valves and air starters and things like that if they needed them, and the leading edge and the wingtip on our starboard wing. Looks absolutely fine if we can focus there on the wingtip. There we go. You can see we have got our green nav light there, looking marvelous and appropriately mounted, in addition to our wingtip painted red. Very nice. Main landing gear on the starboard side visible here. That all looks good. And then moving aft, we have got another rescue arrow there to our hatch for the passenger compartment, as well as our main boarding door on this side. So we can board the passenger compartment aft if we are on the starboard or port side. So very cool. Uniform Romeo 82027, registration reiterated once again. And then back here to the empennage from the starboard side. Mirror image of the port side, but great detail here as well. With Antonov, we have got our horizontal stabilizer with the red wingtip, and our shut lines visible for the rudder control surface here as well. So it all looks very, very nice, and I really, again, don't have too many things to say that would be detracting from this model thus far. It's very, very nicely done. It's a very unique airplane, and I'm quite pleased that Gemini just decided to make it. Now our aft view of AN-124, and here is where we see the other major detail of how this airplane does its bidding. We have got the aft cargo door. It's a big ramp, as you can see. Now these shut lines are not done in 3 dimensions. These are all done via tampo printing, but you can see that they have bothered to make the little skirt hatches here on this side that would flare open so that our main ramp can drop down. Very nice, and I appreciate the attention to detail. Also, you can see these little louvered vents here just forward of the tail cone, right there, in case you are having some perspective issues there with a close range on the camera. But I believe those are for the auxiliary power unit or other power units that would be associated with the cargo bay. I'm not entirely sure where the APUs are on this airplane. There are 2 exhaust outlets that are just out of sight from this angle, but they are here and here on each side, and just like they are there on the AN-225 as well as on the C5, those are power units for the airplane systems as well as for support for whatever is in the cargo bay. So I wouldn't be surprised if we've got multiple auxiliary power units on this airplane as well, but I don't know that precisely, so I'm not going to say anything. But we do have these louvered vents there just below the tail cone and slightly forward thereof, so interesting to note. We've got our control surface shut lines here on the horizontal stabilizers. They're also done in 3 dimensions, so that's very nice. You can just feel a very little divot there where the shut lines are for your elevators. Very cool. And then moving up, you have got yourself the vertical stabilizer here. It is rather blunt here on its trailing edge, and even rather blunt here up to its point, so no real sharp edges to worry about on this one, but very nice nonetheless, and it does look pretty true to the real prototype. Trailing edges of our wings. Here's our port wing where we have the exhaust sides of our engines clearly visible. Looks good. We've got that truncated cone in the exhaust, very nice, and you can see a little bit of the bypass area in the engine as well. Trailing edge of the wing with our pontoons to cover up the flap actuation armature. It looks good. And on the upper side of the wing, might be a little bit difficult to see from this perspective, but when we go freehand you'll see it. We do have shut lines for every single panel of the spoilers up here, as well as for our roll control, our ailerons over here near the wing tips. So very interesting to see all of that, and I'll show all of that to you when we go above in FreeCam. And then over here on our starboard wing, the same deal as well. We have got our pontoons for our flap armature, cover that up for aerodynamics, and then we've got the exhaust sides of our starboard engines, which look just the same as they do on the port side, as they well should. And the same shut lines across the top surface of the starboard wing, also clearly visible. So it looks very, very nice, and I am quite pleased with everything that I see on this wonderful model. Highly recommend. Now going freehand here with our camera so we can get a closer look at some of the details. I really love the shape of this forward section of fuselage. The nose there and the way the shadow is falling across everything, it really highlights the geometries of all of this. The nose here is reasonably low and wide relative to the cockpit, and it's long as well. It's a longer nose, I think, than you've got on the AN-225. I'm not entirely sure why that might be. And we can also see we've got this little chin on the nose as well. So this little bump, I think that was probably added to the design because they needed to accommodate the radar equipment there in the nose cone or whatever armature they have there to actuate things. But it definitely looks cool, and it's very distinctive. I don't see too many bumps on the noses of airplanes, so that's there, and it looks really cool, and it's rendered very nicely. Additionally to that, you can see the shut lines there on the nose, and you can see with the way the reflections are falling into them, you can see that they are in 3 dimensions, and they are brilliant. I absolutely love it. I also just love the overall proportion here. As we look from above over the cockpit windows, you can see the windshield wipers there. It all looks great, and you can just see how wide and flat that nose is ahead of the cockpit windows. Very, very cool. To the rear of the cockpit, you can see that we have got our antenna, and we've also got these printed antennas, which are just added for visual effect, not rendered in 3 dimensions, but they're printed there. Very cool. And additionally to that, you can see all of that information, International Cargo Transporter, and from here I hope you might be able to see, or at least be able to read some of the contact information. That's very, very nice, and I appreciate that attention to detail. We've also got another notice here on the port side, and I'm not entirely sure what it says or if it's even fully legible. My eyes can't make it out because it's just too small. Maybe you'll be able to see something if you pause the video, but regardless, there is a notice that is posted there. Over the midsection of the top side of the fuselage, this is obviously our wing root and where the wing is mounted to the model. You can see that secondary antenna, and we have got our nav beacon light there as well. Looks cool. And here are the shut lines over top the wings for all of our flaps and spoilers. You can see everything there in terms of what you see for the flap shut lines and the spoiler shut lines. Every single panel here is rendered there, and it is a partial three-dimensional rendering as well as a tampo print accent on it, because I can feel here that there are some bumps, but they're very shallow, and the tampo printing there is just accentuating everything. You can also see the aileron shut line here as well. That's very cool. So it's all there. It's tampo print, and it is three-dimensional, but it's very shallowly done in 3 dimensions. But regardless, all of it is there, and it does look very, very nice. As we rotate things back around, you can now see the leading edge of the wing with the shut lines for our slats. That's all very nicely done. And then our engines there and the pylons to which they're mounted. Very, very nice. I like all of that immensely. Moving aft, we start to get into the passenger compartment area. That all looks very nice. Like all of that. You've got another one of those rescue decals here visible next to the door, pointing toward that opener armature there. You've got your registration. You've got another boarding door back here that's unmarked, and then your empennage there with your horizontal and vertical stabilizers. Very, very cool. And you can see the last little flourish there resembling a Ukrainian flag in the cheat line that goes all the way through the livery from the nose tip all the way back the entire length of the fuselage, and terminating there at the vertical stabilizer. Looks very nice, very appropriate for a Ukrainian airplane, which this, of course, very much is. And all in all, I've got to say, a very appropriate and competently done model by Gemini Jets. Like I said, this was a surprise for me, and once I saw that they were going to release one of these in these colors, it was an instant buy. Had to get it. I've got its bigger brother, so it means that I've got to have this one as well. These are two of the most unique airplanes ever, the AN-225 and the AN-124. They're siblings, and one is very much a development of the other, as in the 225 is a development of the 124. So you absolutely have to get them. If you've got one, you've got to have the other, because it's just not complete if you don't. And a collection that's got holes in it, well, it's a collection that's got holes in it. So I filled that hole in mine. And if you're considering getting this airplane, then I'd also strongly suggest you take a look at that Herpa AN-225, just so that you could fill any voids there if you do happen to like this particular type of airplane. And one final bit of detail that I wanted to show on the underside of the airplane, there is still some stuff to see. First of all, on the nose, you can see that we have got some information. We've got Antonov International Cargo Transporter, and then we've got the same contact information that's on the port and starboard sides of the forward fuselage, so that's all good. We've got shut lines for our landing gear doors, obviously the nose landing gear here, and then as we move aft, you can see that the whole belly is painted in this sort of I was going to say battleship gray, but it's got some blue in it as well, but very cool. Gemini Jets logo there visible, looks very, very nice, and we've got our stand hole as well, so we'll see this on the stand in the outro roll. And then, of course, we have got our main landing gear, and you can see just how many we have got here. We have got 10 axles back here, 5 on each side. That's a lot of axles. Very cool. Here are the exhausts that we couldn't see from aft earlier on, but there they are, and they are servicing the cargo bay, I believe. I don't know if they are also exhausting for an auxiliary power unit or auxiliary power units, plural, for the airplane, for avionics and pressurization and things like that, but obviously you've got exhaust ports there, and then our shut lines for our rear cargo ramp. Very cool. our undersides of the empennage. The air shut lines, again, for our horizontal stabilizers at least. The vertical stabilizer is underneath all of this mess. Here are these louvered vents that I pointed out earlier. I'm not entirely sure what they do, but I don't know. They might even be connected to a valve system to allow ambient air into the cargo bay on the ground or at low altitudes. That's interesting. And then undersides of the main wings, there we go. Our engines, and then our registration, Uniform Romeo 82027, iterated here on the underside of the port wing, but not under the starboard wing. So that's interesting to note, but great detail all the way down on the underside as well. Even our Gemini Jets logo is back there. So that's all very, very nice. And then, of course, on our starboard wing, similar details just done in a mirror. So if you wanted to flip it over and take a look at it, that is roughly what it looks like. Very much like all of that.
So there it was, the Antonov 124, rendered in 1/400 scale by Gemini Jets. As I said off the beginning, I was surprised to see this come out of Gemini Jets because they make a whole lot of airliners, and we love all of those. Boeing, Airbus, they've made a few Embraers recently that I've yet to get, but I do want those. They're great. But this is just different. And I think it serves Gemini Jets well to be making these types of airplanes as well. I absolutely love it when they do something that's a little bit out of the ordinary, and especially when they do as competent a job as they have done here on this AN124. It really does speak very well about their research and their design and their manufacturing processes, because this is absolutely immaculate. I can't really find too many things to dock points off it. I do see the nose landing gear being a little bit of maybe not even a proper detractor, but it's a production fault. One of them is a little bit too short, or the other one is a little bit too long. I'm not entirely sure which is which, but they're uneven, and you do notice it if you're looking for it. If this is going to be on display as part of a diorama setup that you may have, it doesn't affect how the airplane is sitting on the ground. It's not lopsided, port to starboard. It's certainly not sitting with a nose high attitude or anything like that. So it will display just fine, and I don't really think it's a problem. Continuing that point about the landing gear, though, they are totally static. They are entirely plastic tires on this, and they don't roll at all. So if that's something that is a concern for you, well, now you're aware of it, and you'll be able to make your decisions accordingly. But aside from those things, everything on this is brilliant. The construction of this is die-cast throughout. The only bits of plastic are the landing gear, the engine pylons, and the engine nacelles themselves. Everything else is entirely die-cast. It is a weighty model. I would estimate it probably weighs about the same as the C5 model, which is about 12 ounces. So it's getting on the heavier side for a 1/400 scale model, but it tells you that you are dealing with solid metal construction, which of course is going to be good for longevity, as well as just it feels nice to handle. You know that you're dealing with something that has some quality behind it, and it's not just put together so that they can say, yeah, we made a 124. It's very nicely done. It's very competently constructed, and the livery on it is great. I very much prefer the Antonov Airlines livery over some of the other liveries that this airplane does wear, and it just makes for a very, very nice piece. And being the airplane that it is, with its bigger brother being the largest successful airplane of all time, and this one being the transport workhorse that it remains even nigh on 40 years after it was introduced, it's really a very nice piece to have if you do like some more offbeat airplanes in your collections. Well, definitely give this one a very strong look. And it's coming from Gemini Jets, so we know them. They're the biggest player in the business, and they're the biggest player in the business because they do what they do very, very well. And this continues to carry all of that provenance forward. It's a great release. It is a 2021 release, so they are still available from some third-party retailers. I think Gemini Jets from their official shop have sold out, but they are still out there, and they can be had for MSRP right now. But like every Gemini Jets release, this is the only production run for this particular model. Will they make other 124s in the future? There's a distinct possibility of that. But for the moment, this is the last one that they have released. So if you do want it, it is still available. Go get it. Until next time, though, I do hope that you have all enjoyed this one. FerrariMan601 saying thank you very much for watching, and of course, we will see you soon.